Maya Angelou. Is that how you pronounce? Do you know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's
they are
pretty accurate.
actually,
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
Yeah, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it
yeah.
is, yeah.
Perfect. I love her quotes, and a lovely woman popped it under my Brené Brown's quote, which I will talk about in a second. And Maya said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you.
Welcome to the Full Stop Podcast with Berenice Smith from Walking Our Shoes, Sarah Lawrence from After the Storm, and me, Michael Hughes from Married and Childless. If this is your first time here, our podcast is centred around supporting the childless not by choice community. Our aim is to be a focal point for the community, and with all our special guests, show you how to manage your grief and there's issues specific to us. And by example, show that a full and happy life can be had without children we dearly wanted. Now, this episode, we're having a conversation with the gorgeous Helen Siegel and her work with grief and the arts, showing how the arts can be a therapy to help with managing grief. But before we join Helen, we just want you to know Sarah couldn't be with us on this episode. It will be explained later. Berenice and I just wanted to say, we missed you, Sarah. It doesn't feel right when you're not with us. Okay. Let's talk to Helen.
Hi, hello everyone. My name's Helen Siegel and I am the founder of Empowered Childlessness. Oh, it's so lovely to be here, and thank you, Berenice and Michael, for asking me to come on to talk about the healing arts, and especially around grief, and especially around, for me, it's about childlessness. I am a childless woman, of course. I am used to be an arts teacher, and I still teach art, but my passion is around using the healing arts. I'm an arts counsellor. I actually work with children, but I also work with women and some men to support around the issue around childlessness, and using the arts and therapeutic techniques to help them embody, to help them to sort of accept, really embrace themselves. And a little bit more about me is I'm dyslexic, and I was brought up, I wasn't able to speak until I was 3. And that was something that was so quite traumatic to me, actually, as a very young person. So communication is utmost for me. And I remember, I tell this story, it was when I was 3 years old, and I was walking home from play school with my mother and my little baby brother. And suddenly I noticed that I hadn't got my teddy, and this bear was my security blanket. It really supported me in just being, really. It gave me that comfort that I needed as a 3-year-old. And I found it wasn't in my arms, and I screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. My poor mum in the middle of the road, as you see mums, right, just got their kids on the floor screaming, just couldn't comfort me. And she couldn't actually understand what I was trying to say to her. Most 3-year-olds can speak, right? I couldn't tell her that I was distraught. I could show her, but I couldn't tell her. And I remember my mum saying, "You wait." She started telling me off. "You wait till your dad gets home." So, with my tail between my legs, I sort of, like humphed off home behind my mum, and got home. My dad actually did tell me off quite severely, and I just learned that I needed to be quiet in my emotional life. I mean, that wasn't the only time that I was told that emotions weren't okay. So as I grew up, went to school, I learned how to speak. I had an amazing speech therapist at Great Ormond Street, and she spent 6 months patiently teaching me to speak. And then it was just such a beautiful feeling to be able to put feelings, words, connected to feelings. I mean, I found it very hard. Imagine like 3 years of my life not speaking and then suddenly trying to sort of catch up. Anyway, I went to school, and unfortunately, through that delay that I had of development, things didn't go off quite well. And I sort of, with that message of I'm not enough, I can't express my emotions, they're not okay, I'm not okay, something's wrong, those messages sort of followed me through, and I had quite a lot of bullying happening at school, and not being able to communicate effectively to myself, really, of how serious it was, but also to people that could help to make things better. And that sort of spiraled in teenage years. Things got worse, as they do in teenage years, right? They don't find things easy to communicate in teenage. It's hard to be a teenager. And then so I got habits and behaviors that just made things worse. I became quite a people pleaser. I became quite a codependent and did things that just sort of hurt me, really. And that sort of led to, when I was 28, I was working on the ships, and I met a person that really helped me realize that, hey, something is not right here. My relationships were really poor. I was heavily into food disorder, of trying to be perfect. I needed to be perfect, and it, you can't be perfect, right? We can really try and be perfect, but it's an impossible task, and it was causing me a lot of grief. So I got into therapy, I got into personal development, and I started to learn how to communicate my emotions. First of all, touch my emotions, and it can be stressful to start with, but I learned that feelings are not our enemy. We don't need to put a heavy blanket over them. We don't need to squish them down deep into our bodies, or tuck them under the carpet. We don't need to do that. In fact, to live a healthy life, we need to process our emotions. We need to process, heal things that have been uncovered, like stuffed for a little while. We need to express them. And I learned very early on in that time, I was in a workshop, and I remember this so beautifully, that there's this gentleman who's unfortunately no longer with us, called Bob Earl. And it was a creative, creative arts, but the workshop incorporated the arts, so writing and dancing and drawing, and I just loved it. And I remember running around this room, pretending to be, I was pretending to be a bird, I don't know. And I remember Bob going, "Fly, Helen, fly." And my imagination just helped me soar. And I just felt amazing. I was able to express that joy in my heart that hadn't been expressed. I was also able to express a lot of self-hatred in my writing and in some drawing, and for it to be witnessed, and for me to sort of let go of some of my self-hatred at the time. And that helped me start taking more risks. I went to college. I had flunked out of school. I left school at 16 with very little qualifications, and I really wanted to go back. I started to get, once those feelings are processed, other things start moving in our lives. So I went to college, and that went into art college, then I went to university, and I wanted to teach children to embrace their creativity. I became an arts teacher, and then I just thought, in the system, this is not working. I can't do what I want to do. So then I trained as a counsellor, and specifically an arts counsellor. I connected more to the intuitive arts, and all the way through it's about being heard and being seen. And in my classroom and with the women I work with, it's about witnessing them and supporting them to embrace, to reclaim what they've been hidden. So when I became a childless woman after 2 IVF treatments, I realized that this work that I was doing, that I had been doing for 20 years, could really be interpreted and to support women who are childless to uncover their grief. You know, I was seeing for myself, when I became a childless woman, I screamed. I don't know how you guys were, but I screamed. I screamed my heart out, and I crawled, under the covers and just wept with that longing that I knew that I would never be the mum. I got to a healing place that I met my partner, and we really had a lot of hope. Even though I was in my 40s, there was a lot of hope in my heart that hadn't been. And you know what they say, Jodie talks about it. It's like, I was brought up in the 70s and 80s. You have sex, you have a child, right? Well, that's what you need to do. Have sex and you have a baby. So don't have sex, or, have lots of precautions, and then you won't have a baby. So we just thought, even though I was in my 40s, I was just like, that I would have a child, even though my mind, there was a part of me going, this is too late. All the doctors were just saying to me, it's going to happen. So all the way through that, I weaved my arts, and I look at them when I'm doing a lot of copy at the moment on my new website, and there's a lot of heartache that's in those books. And what that helped me was that I was not alone. It wasn't stuffed inside me, that I was able to write it, to draw it, those painful times. And so, yeah, I've come to a place that communication is utmost in grief. I need to communicate. I write and draw most days. And when I don't draw, I don't write, I definitely miss that communication and sort of uncovering what is actually going on for me, because life's busy. I know about you guys, but I get caught up in the news and doing what I'm doing, and I can neglect. And very early on in my grief, I realized that I needed to honor. And one of the advertising Jodie's Reignite, because I knew Jodie before Gateway, and I joined Reignite. It was like I was ready to do some work, and I remember sitting there going, you know what? Why am I feeling so ashamed of grieving? And what is this I'm actually feeling? And it was realizing that I had to, my first workshops were Grieve with Gusto. So it's like, how can we grieve big, right? How can I grieve big, not in everyone's life, but how can I allow myself just to be and grieve with gusto, grieve without shame, grieve with, you know, the countries where they wail, you know,
Yeah,
when,
that therapeutic grief, isn't it? The grief where it's more. I went to a funeral last year, and many funerals as we all do, I suppose, and it's that typical sort of British funeral where everyone's doing the yes, and how are you, and actually what you want to do is really kind of get sometimes quite vocal, I
yeah,
think, about it. I think that's it, yeah, that's, yeah. But
yeah,
it's much more therapeutic. I think when you see grief in other countries and other cultures, it can often feel a little bit, I think sometimes quite awkward, because we're just so not used to that. But actually it's so therapeutic to have a good wail, a good scream, a good, yeah, it's a good thing. Do you think
it,
it suppresses this? I mean, if you think about grief, I don't know whether it's something you've encountered, that if we hold the grief and we keep it close and we don't talk about it, at some point I always find it then comes out later, and
yes.
how that's never, to me, feels particularly healthy. That I think we should all grieve a bit louder, a bit more openly.
I mean, I suppose we all grieve differently. I mean, in my training, um, we looked at different, I was going to say sects, but different religions, different, I can't think of the word, religions and organizations, and how they create funeral, how they create, like a ceremony, whether it's a ceremony, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, in the Jewish, I'm Jewish, and in the Jewish ceremony, afterwards there's prayers, and we pray for I think it's 7 days. And you know, there'll be Israelis here and Jewish people here will know, and please correct me because I'm not a practicing Jewish person, but I remember that the grieving person family sits, and basically people come in, it's a set time, and there's people around them, and there's a set number of people that pray with them, and then other people come in and they pray with them as well and send their regards. They don't cook, and they're just really looked after in this time. Candles are lit, memorial candles are lit, yahrzeit candles are lit every year, and it's beautiful. I love that part. It's beautiful, and it's sort of an honoring that it's sort of set, that we don't have to think about it. But somehow in childlessness, because it's disenfranchised, we don't have that.
Mm.
You know, it's like the Christian, the Irish, they have their wakes, but we don't have that. And I think it's so important for us to, as when we're letting go, even if it's child free, even if it's out of choice, there's a time in that choice, there's still a loss, you know, because a choice is either this or this, right? So you need to let go of something. I still, you know, there's changing careers, there's still a loss. It's a choice, but what was with circumstances, childless out of circumstances, and is that choice is being taken away, so that grief is different. Yeah, we don't like not getting what we want, right? As human beings, we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
that's
it. It's
true. Yeah.
excruciating, especially, you know, as children, but as adults, it's really painful. And I think honoring our through some form of ritualization, ceremony, some form of every year I light a candle. I light candles with other losses in my life. and light them for 24 hours, just honoring that time for myself, honoring that loss and those feelings that I have. I write, I've planted seeds, I've bought plants and grow them, and there's something about doing that for ourselves, and I suppose that's what my workshops are all about. It's creating that time to honor that loss, to process those feelings, to let go of wounds that and I suppose I'm talking about the creative wounds. I'm talking about things that are no longer true in our lives, that can get hooked into our childlessness. So for me, when I was, and I don't know about you guys, but when I went through that, when I on the bed screaming when their last IVF did not work, I, afterwards, after a while, and I know Berenice, that it does take some time, because part of the loss we go into shock. So even though I screamed when I was out in public, there was a part of me, there was a relief as well of getting him back into work, and I was smashing my vision boards. I was ripping up old journals that I had been writing to my unborn children. I mean, all of that needed to be processed. So there was a releasing in that, but it was afterwards that I noticed that those wounds of those messages that 3-year-old, in fact probably earlier 2-year-old, I'm going probably earlier anyway, I'm not enough, I didn't do it right, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be feeling that, all those old messages started to creep up in my life as a childless woman. Like, now what? Shit, I didn't make it work. Oh, can I swear here?
You can swear, it's absolutely fine.
Like, fuck, like, what did I do wrong? I didn't do this and I didn't do that, and perfectionism started crawling in, and all of that needed to be processed and understood. So the workshops are not just to grieve our childlessness, it's also to reclaim ourselves, reclaim our lives, and I think it's a long process. For me, it's been 5 years, and that embracing and reclaiming and releasing and recreating, taking risks, being quiet, not being quiet. It's such a big, rich journey to go down, really. I feel very honored. I don't know if I feel honored. I don't know if I'd wish anyone to be childless if they wanted to have children. But I think what I'm starting to feel is like there's, sitting here talking to you, and anytime I talk in podcasts and interviews, and when I'm doing my summits, there's I feel honored to be in a group of going down this journey, because it's not easy, right? It's rich with emotion. It feels like what a proud life, not to be feeling and living this, and make it, I hope I'm making a difference by talking about it and saying emotions are okay, and I suppose being authentic. And I feel very,
it's a big learning process, isn't it? I think it's something that we've talked about often between the three of us on the podcast, and I think in groups online, is how I wouldn't be sitting here doing a podcast had I have not been through that process. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Michael or Sarah. And doubtless none of us possibly be on that journey. And it's interesting because I was going to just talk about when you were talking about reclaiming. And I think that's such an important word, because in fact I was talking last night to my husband, because we've been looking tentatively at moving house. And it was trying to say to him, and we've had the conversation before, but there's very different feelings and between, I think, people who've gone through IVF, between partners, and I think it can be two very different things. We talked about it often, I think, in other episodes, and particularly in the Men Matter episodes that we do as well with Michael. But it's living or trying to sort of untangle myself, I'm talking about myself here really, from where I live and the experiences, and bringing together some sort of peace with that, but also trying to explain it as well, because it occurred to me that there is only one room in this house, which happens to be like the room at the front of the house that we've got desks and offices in, that is the only room that didn't impact or has no memory of IVF.
Wow.
Everything else has. And in fact, to a point, that sort of does, because I've got in that room is the file of all of the treatment. Oh, there you go. I see it does have a connection now. But it always has a connection. Even the loft has a connection, because in the loft of our house is still all my box of medication. I kept it. I wanted to keep it. So it's all here, the kitchen. I can remember building the needle that I had to because you had to sort of put that all together, and the dining room, everything in every room had a thing. And when I went into counselling, sometime after, I wouldn't recommend leaving it too long, but I did. Don't do as I say, or do as I did. But it was, I realised at one point that it was what was around me that was kind of almost holding me back from moving forward. And to a degree, yes, there is a kind of thing where I think, okay, I'd like to kind of start again, have that change. But actually, as my husband pointed out, actually last night, this is only as recent as yesterday evening, is that would it matter if you moved house? Does it matter? Because you're still you're still carrying that narrative forward. Whether you're in a different place or another, or here, then it's still going to carry on with you. It's still part of your narrative. And I think it's kind of, I just wanted to go back to the whole thing about reclaiming, because it's almost as if it's it's as if you have this grief, or people have grief, and it is part of your narrative. I think that the story that we all have in our community are also varied and so different, but it's reclaiming ourselves somewhere along the line from this huge trauma, whether you've been like you and I have been through a journey of discovery. A lot of your story resonates with me, because I did an open university degree whilst I was going through IVF. Again, don't recommend it, but I wrote.
I did counselling training for my IVF.
Yeah,
recommend it.
Exactly. And I can remember sitting in a day school, because they do day schools at the Open University, and there was a new grandmother there, and I sat next to her, and like, oh my God. And about 2 or 3 days beforehand, I had miscarried, and I was I thought, I've got to go to the day school. I'm in pain, but I'm going to go. So I'm sitting there, on pain meds, feeling absolutely awful, emotionally fraught, because it was a fair way through. And there she sat. And the lecturer, lady called Rhiannon, was published author, absolutely lovely, mother herself, but she sat there and looked at me and said, you're not quite right, are you? I said, no, I'm really not right. So I really, sorry, I've been through quite a lot, and just tried to give like a very sort of top level view as best as I could in the circumstances. And she just kept a gentle eye on me all the way through all of this. And I said, I don't think I can finish this module. I don't think I can do it. And she said, just write anything and I'll mark it. Just write something. Just get it out. turned out that she'd had recurrent miscarriages as well. I found that out a bit later on, but she just encouraged me to write stuff. And when I go back and look at that and the drawings and the art that I created at the time, which I still have, it's painful, but it was cathartic, because I don't think I would have got through it any other way. I think it kept me sort of somewhere on some sort of degree of sanity. I don't know. It sort of helped, but it's difficult to look at. I can understand that feeling of screaming. I resonate with that terribly. You know, I literally my legs went when my legs going out from under me numerous times during, you know, you just wouldn't hold me up anymore. And I've never felt that before or since. It's just that absolute physical manifestation of something that is just so incredibly painful.
And there's something, you know, as we're speaking, it's like just even honoring this space, even talking about these times, really. And I love, you know, I remember this word reclaiming keeps coming up, and it's like reclaiming our lives, reclaiming who we are, because the grief can take over. And too right, it needs to take over us. It's when we hold on really tight to it. And I think there's a time when, I think there's a natural time we stop identifying with it, or we want to let it go. And it's, you know, I remember, and I think it's not just one time. I think for me, those journals I needed to burn, and I think those journals I will, that was a reclaiming. It was like a ceremony to observe, like, I had suffered, it didn't work, and now it's time, not necessarily to move on, because that word has so much connotation of like never feeling, but it's like there's an empowerment into, right, I'm going to take my next step forward. And this, you know, I boxed up, I don't know if you did this, I boxed up everything, pamphlets, books, oh my God, pills, boxes of, you know what I mean, all of it in a box. And I got, oh gosh, I'm emotional. I got my with this vision board. It was like an A3 vision board, and I went to town. I ripped and burnt, and I brought my partner in, Simon, and there was a tricky part of the break I couldn't do. And I said, can you come and help me? And he said, what are you doing? I told him, and it was the first time I'm feeling the emotion, because I saw him break as well, with breaking this. And I suppose, you know, sort of bringing you in, Michael, of like, you know, men sort of hold it together, right? Si sort of holds it together, and he processes his grief very differently. And sometimes it has been on the back of my grief, like he's had a permission to allow those feelings to sort of break through the cracks. And part of that breaking of this very hard piece of wood sort of helped him break and allowed me to see the grief that he was feeling. So I don't know if you identified.
There's many things that resonate or rumble through our life, in that, from what you've said, and it's a joke within our circle of friends, is we're on to something like our 4th garden renovation and our 4th house redesign. Because one of the things that Vicky talks about is that the as Berenice said, is the memories that sit here. And for me, I get it, I understand it, but for me, it's more of, I don't know what the word is, but it's like it's like you say, honor it. It's like getting used to it. The way I would put it, is own it.
Yes.
I sort of got that bit of campaign a couple of, World Childless weeks ago. And that's the way that I would explain it, is you've got to own it. It's not, don't wishy-washy it, don't dilute it. You're childless. That's it. Get used to it. Obviously, you lovely ladies would put it in a much more eloquent way, but that's the way I see it. And so, yeah, look, so Vicky and our dynamic is a little bit different in that, there is, and I'm not saying tension or stress or anything, but, we still got a way to go. A lot of people look at us and think, wow, from a childless perspective, you guys have got it together. But no, no, I shouldn't say no. What I should say is that it's a continual thing that we work on all the time. So listening to you, and listening to say honoring it, I totally get that. Even though some people in our community who may not be as far down the line of acceptance as some, will be just going, what the fuck is it? How can we honor this? It's killing me.
I think that's quite true, though. I think it is. I mean, what you've said there, you and Vicky, I think very much reflects how we are here. Kenny and I, we were talking last night because it came up, and it turned into quite a heated conversation about the house and about being here. And I can't remember how the conversation even started, but it's as if it's a different way of looking at it. For him, the children would have been, he calls it like the icing on the cake, but he was quite happy with the fact we didn't have children. It would have all been fine, and either way. For me, it was that's what I wanted, and I think also partly I think because we're all growing up at roughly the same time, children of the 70s and the 80s, and that's almost how like society conforms. And I suppose my hope is that for the next generation and these conversations we're having, and the slightly more openness of the difference between childlessness and child-free, and that future generations that my godchildren won't have all of this. They won't have to conform to things. I have a very dear teenager in my life who identifies as non-gender. She's and she's had that choice, and they've had that choice to do that. That then means that they don't have to conform to the, okay, like I get married, I have kids, or I meet someone and I have children. That they have that choice to have a wider life than perhaps sometimes our society sort of thinks we should have, or we have to conform to things. And maybe that's also perhaps there's that society pressure perhaps as well. Of again, how men grieve, how women grieve, how people grieve together or don't, as the case may be. I'm digressing slightly, but I kind of can see it from the point of view of, Kenny and I are very similar, I think, to you and Vicky. And I noticed that when I met you and we were all talking in London, I could see so many parallels, because it is, and sometimes you need that guy thing, and you do. And I've always appreciated that, because I've always gotten much better, and I have a very male-dominated family, and it's like it is, So there's a lot of that, don't do the fluffy stuff. Let's just cut to the crap here. This is what it is, and this is what we've got to deal with, and this is the problem. But grief isn't so guy-like. It's not so easily defined, is it?
No,
and it's trying to
not.
bridge that gap in that conversation, because it's intangible and difficult to pin down.
It certainly is.
No, I think I love that male perspective is, especially in this community, or all communities, right? It's about balance, and I think for me, I own it. For me, embrace it. It's like we can be on the outside, right? We can be not owning it, and it's, for me, that's so painful. And how that's painful, I can go into when I'm not owning things. I don't know about you guys, but I'm blaming. I'm blaming myself, shaming myself, so it's internal, but I'm also blaming other people. I'm shaming other people. I can be quite, it's not fair. I have to be very aware of my own entitlement, and even my entitlement as a childless woman. And I have to be really, so it's like owning this journey, owning our lives is, I was actually someone's just posted on my community. I wrote, I love Brené Brown. I was talking to Leslie Pine on Wednesday, and we were talking about the creative wound, and part of the work, embracing our lives, how we feel, who we are, what we're in, our reality, like life on life's terms, is, I'm going to just say this quote by, Maya Angelou. Is that how you pronounce? Do you know?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Actually, yes,
yeah. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I love her quotes, and a lovely woman popped it under my Brené Brown's quote, which I will talk about in a second. And Maya said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Like not telling our stories, not seeing is more unbearable than seeing. We don't feel it at the time, because when I'm in my avoidance space, when I'm not wanting because it's too painful. I know when I went through my second IVF treatment, I was like, there was a part of me going, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to go? Do I really want to be a parent in my 60s now? Having young children in my 60s, or a teenager in my 60s. Do I really want to, working with teenagers, do I really want to go there? But I couldn't bear not trying. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't bear. It's like I couldn't. And for me, when I don't know, not. I see what it feels. I see women in my groups when they connect to and they share their stories as we're sharing here. There's a healing. There's a connectedness. There's a I don't know about a relief, but there's, as you talk about, Berenice, there's a catharticness. But for me, there's a difference between when I paint. I remember being in a workshop when I'm painting, when I was painting one day, and there was a catharticness of like, oh, you're making really big painting, and this person was just like, oh, like splatting. I mean, it was just amazing. It's like this cathartic. I actually felt really good doing that right now. It's like, but there's this sense of release, like release onto the canvas, releasing our dancing, release, me just doing this, I can just feel the release in my body. But there's also a gentle processing where, mindfulness, where we just feel what's in our bodies and allow it to, for me, others do it through planting, gardening, others do it through cooking, others do it through yoga and meditation, that they're able, and breath work, where we're embracing, owning what's in our bodies, and then let it come in and then let it go out. I mean, that's the healthy part, right? And in I can't think of the trauma specialist. I've got his book. He talks about when big emotions, and these, for me, trauma is one like trapped emotion in our body, but also emotion on top of emotion on top of emotion on top of emotion that hasn't been. So there's just layers and layers of emotion trapped in our body. And you know, when a gazelle is being chased by a lion and he's in hyper alert and running for his life, once he's got away and the lion's got tired, or the cheetah's got tired, because the gazelle can run a lot, not as fast, but he can run a lot longer distance than the cheetah. The gazelle shakes. The gazelle sort of like has all this trapped emotion in their body, like it's just like shut down quick, and then it flies, right? He just and that shaking, that sense of release, it needs to release. So I release onto what you were saying, Berenice, you released onto the book, right? Onto your writing. I release in my, talk about cosmic smash booking in a second. I release in my cosmic smash booking through resting pages and processing in my journal, and sometimes on my painting. It's a different type of processing, but we need to allow the body to release, to let go of the emotions. And it's when we trap them inside that and holding them, that's when, yeah, it's sad, we stay still, or we go through the same cycling. I know with Sarah we'll talk about the repeat cycling counseling, and it's how can we stop that, how can we stop this recycling, and allow ourselves to live our lives, and own it, right? But live a freer life, live a more vitality life, live a more joyous life as a childless woman and man person. You know, I was thinking about genders actually, because there's you know, there will be, and there are people out there who don't identify as man, woman, and still will be childless. So that, I'm sure that's going to be coming soon into our awareness. Well, it started coming to my awareness as I was writing copy yesterday. But it's like, how can we release? How can we own? How can we embrace? How can we reclaim our lives? How can we get rid of these old burnt out messages that we're not enough, that we're not okay in society? And just thinking about these people out there who tell us, oh well, we can adopt, and you know, the stupid freaking comments that people who don't understand, who don't understand, they're not educated they're not educated. Like, I'm not always educated in gender issues. I'm not educated completely. I'm not educated in other areas. But I own that, and I try and sort of, find out, and but I don't become an expert in things that I don't know. Does that make sense? No, you might.
It does make sense. Absolutely, sense. It does. Yeah,
really.
Yeah, no, that absolutely, it does make sense. It's why we kind of broaden the podcast and have all of our guests here to talk about that, because there's things that we, you know, oddly we don't know about either. A lot we don't know.
Well, it's almost like our podcast is like it's our own personal little education hub where, you know, and as Berenice says, the guests we get on are here to enrich us as well as our audience.
Which is
we're just the vehicle for that to happen.
Yeah, it is. In fact, actually, this is a good point. Just because we were going to say a long time where Sarah is today. We ought to just tell you that Sarah, we haven't left her from the podcast. She's not disappeared and run off somewhere.
Do with
She's
me either.
nothing to do with Helen either. No, it's not. Sarah, and we didn't actually announce this on the previous episode, so we're going to announce it very belatedly. So, but in August 2020, alongside in the middle of a pandemic, whilst balancing businesses, whilst this very podcast took over Sarah's life, she qualified as a counsellor.
Yeah!
So massive congratulations. It's fantastic. So she's been working really hard for that for a long time. She brings so much experience and so much. I can say all this because she's not here, so we can sit there and just say how fantastic Sarah is, because she's like, I don't know what I bring to the podcast, and we keep telling her lots. Stop.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't know. So she's fantastic. Obviously, our third person. She's not here, and she's actually on a workshop today. On trauma, and I'm sure that at some point in a future episode she will be talking to us about what she's learnt and about her recent journey to becoming a fully qualified counsellor. I know she's got loads of stuff coming up, some exciting stuff with Muriel, actually, Muriel Well, who has appeared on this podcast often and in the previous episode. At the time of recording, we haven't put that up, but anyway, it will be when this is released. It's like a whole parallel universe going on. But anyway, so well done, Sarah. Congratulations, lovely lady, and she will be back on the next episode.
Yes, she will. But we've got to delve into this just a little bit deeper, because it's got a bit of a funny side to it that Sarah and Helen have been communicating for months to try and get us all lined up. And the day that we do it, she double booked with this workshop. So yeah,
there's a guy. So it's
well, we miss you, Sarah.
Yeah, we do. We miss you loads. It's so difficult sometimes to get everyone lined up when we need to, but it's all a teamwork. We do miss you very much. But yeah, she'll be back asking all the wise questions that we've probably forgotten to ask. Luckily, we have Helen here, so and Helen knows all of the wise questions already.
So it's interesting. I want to take you back just probably half an hour, to when you talked about not being able to grieve because it's like you're not allowed. Yeah. So a funny thing happened to me today, and I'm blaming my wife, but she's been telling me all week that it's Father's Day. Today, which is Sunday here in Australia. Oh, well, it's Sunday there too. But anyway, so I've got in my head it's Father's Day. And this morning I'm writing a couple of posts, which I like to do to let people around the world know, well, in Australia, because it's only for here, that I'm thinking of the other guys around the, in Australia and then in the clan of brothers. And anyway, there was lots of people told me, you've got it wrong. So I feel like a bit of an idiot. But I got a reply from a friend who said this: I assume you're talking about Father's Day. You've got it wrong. It's next week. Now, I can't help but think that it may be the intention was that, well, I assume you're talking about Father's Day, as if to say that I'm not allowed to mention it, because I like to mention Father's Day to the males in the community, or the people that identify as male in our community. There's someone thinking about them, because the guys won't normally get that. But it's almost like I'm not allowed to say that. How dare I? How dare I say that on a special day like Father's? So yeah, going back to what again, Helen, you resonate quite a lot with me.
And isn't it interesting? It's like that place of course as a non-mother, but I mother myself, and I definitely, I suppose my work, I have to be careful not to mother, but it's a caring profession. It's my baby, Empower Childlessness is my baby. My cat is my baby. I just because I don't have a child, there's still that mother, it's a part of whether evolution, it's a part of me that doesn't die just because I don't have children. Actually, it's interesting because as I'm talking, it's like actually it needs to be owned. I love that word, actually. Just own it. Just from embrace it, reclaim that mother within ourselves. It's the same as, embrace, own our warrior in all of us, man and woman. Embrace our feminine and masculine sides. Embrace our queen, our sovereignty. The work that I do, it's embracing, reclaiming our queen, our king, and living those lives. For me, that's empowering. The work that over the last year I've been doing personal work around owning those archetypes within myself, and it's interesting, as I'm talking, it's like my shoulders broaden. Do you know what I mean? It's like being in our king, being in our queen, being in our mother part. And it's like too right. Do you know what I mean? Too right that we talk about Mothering Sunday and Fathering Sunday. And we were just talking about before we pressed record, wasn't it? It was just like, actually, what happens is that, not so much now, actually, because there is a lot of, I have done quite a lot of grief, but I still feel, even during this podcast, I'm still feeling those feelings. They just don't overwhelm me. I see them, I feel them in my body, and then I go, oh, there they are. And then I can breathe and just get on with the podcast.
It's interesting because you can see it in your sitting here. Obviously, the podcast listeners can't see this, but actually you can see it in your body language as well. I think it's very visual. That sitting up straighter, when you're saying like your shoulders broadening, then yes, you're sitting up straight. It's so interesting to see that, and it's very it's interesting. It's just
I've actually painted my queen, and the work that I do personally, and I am thinking about bringing that out to other women and men, actually.
I hope you do, because I think it's very powerful.
I mean, it's definitely in my workshops, in my 40-day workshops, we talk about the queen and which I'll talk about in a second. But there's something about Father's Day and Mother's Day. It's like when that comes, and it same as Christmas, right? Christmas, Valentine's Day, all these days that are scattered through the year. For me, what they've done is they are a portal. They are a trigger. They are a trigger to anything that is going on for me that I've not done, the emotional work that I've not looked at. So it's really important for me to light candles, so I honor those emotions that come up, because grief will come up. And I hope I don't put my foot in, but I'm hesitant. But there's part of me sort of going, say it, Helen. Is like, those triggers are important. They are doorways. They are, Jodie days. I'm wondering if they are gateways to own and to reclaim ourselves in who we are, not to, and for me, it's like with gusto. Do you know what I mean? With love and kindness was my other workshops. We own ourselves as women and men who have trauma in our past, who've going through grief today, who don't have children, who need to think about, Simon and I have been really talking about, like, where do we want to live when we're older? The type of house that we want. We live in a flat at the moment. It's like, who's going to not necessarily look after us? Like, what's going to happen when we get older? We don't have children. My father passed in March, and it's I'm really observing my mum, and both myself and my brother, we're speaking to her every day, and I'm noticing, actually, I'm not going to have that. What's going to be calling me up? And I need to think about those things, not from a place of, I'm going to say, not from a place of fear. I'm scared, but like, how can I empower myself? What things do I need to put into place now? And I'm 54. So it's like, there's stuff that I need to work on to make sure, and I have, there's, I'm stuttering now. So it's like, there's things that I need to definitely work on that need to be sorted by the time I'm in my 60s and 70s and 80s, if I last that long. And it's, I suppose I digress, and it's like, how can the arts and how can the therapeutic arts, how can counseling, how can writing, how can all of this be support us? It's owning, right? It's the first step. And I love, Michael, you talked about safety with Vicky, because it's like, how can we create that safe place for ourselves? Because no one else is going to do that for us. Counseling and therapy can help us identify we don't have a safe place, and it can be one of our safe places if we're lucky. It's like, how can we create a safe place? And I suppose with my writing, my arts, I have no one telling me I can't do stuff in my writing. That's, I worked with Julia Cameron, with her Artist Way and Morning Pages well over 27 years ago. I started. So I don't what's the word? I don't critique my writing. I don't have a policeman. My inner critic, I tell to go and off itself. Do you know what I mean? When I'm writing, I still have creative wounds around my creativity, but I work through them, and I support other women and men to work through their wounds. And for me, going through the creative wound, as Brené Brown talks about, actually helps me in my grieving and in my life. Because if I can work through that creative wound, if I can allow myself not to stand up, and this is internal practice for myself. I know, Bernice, you're creative. I'm not sure, Michael, I know you have creativity. It's the first time we've really met, but it's like, how can we allow ourselves to be free? How can we stop policing ourselves, policing our emotions, policing what we do, criticizing what we do as a human being? And however we do that, whether it's yoga, whether it's cooking, whether it's gardening, whether it's making, for me, it's about getting in my sketchbook or my cosmic smashbooking, my smashbook, and I allow myself to listen and just to do what needs to be done. I put my pen on my paper, I put my brush on my paper, I put my brush in my color, and I support other women to trust their internal wisdom, and they start realizing how what is stopping them. As soon as you come to your sketchbook, as soon as you come to your cosmic smashbooking, as soon as you are in front of your canvas, your journal, you start noticing what stops you. And when you go through that and you tell whatever's stopping you to go in and jump into a river or get torn up in, we do the exercises, tearing up our internal judge, our internal criticism, our negative beliefs, and we pop them in where they need to go, which is either a little doggy poo bag or in the bin and outside the actual environment, because it's toxic, right? That stuff is toxic and we need to get it out. And then we turn up freely And I suppose with Kat Geller, who is my teacher I'm a qualified cosmic smashbook guide, we just turn up at our page and we ask what needs to be looked at, or we write what is actually truly in our hearts and our minds, and we ask for guidance, we ask for healing, we ask for instruction, we ask for calmness, we ask for grounding, we ask for what we need. And then the miracle of this process is that it's given to us quite quickly. Our wisdom is given to us. We know the answers. In my workshop Create Joy last year, I was told to go to the Himalayas. I was almost booking it, but I needed to sort some stuff out. But it's something that feels really true in my heart, that a adventure needs to be done. And I lit up those, I think there was 11 women in my group, and they saw me light up, and I did the research, and it was like reclaiming something that had not been in my consciousness at the time, because it was unconscious. So how can we tap into the unconscious mind, our unconscious wants and needs, our excitement again? At 40s and 50s, the women and men that we work with, I worked with a 30-ish year old, and she had an amazing story. I won't tell her story here, but it was amazing. And through the 40-day program a few months ago, she uncovered what she really wanted to do. She had her scream. She had her, I suppose, breakthrough within the 40 days to let go, to release, and then to reclaim what it was, what her heart really desired. And she made a choice, one of the most bravest choices, to really let go, because she's still young, but she made a choice. She had enough. She's taken her life back into her own hands, and she's training. She's she's retraining, and I can imagine her in this community in I don't know, a year's time, really making a difference to other women. And she's starting to talk to her family, talk to friends, talk to women in the community of how important it is to, reclaim ourselves, right? To reclaim the lives that have not been lived. I mean, Jodie's beautiful copy about, her book, Living the Unexpected Life. That is the book's title. I've got it in my bookshelf. Living a Life Unexpected. That's it. It's profound, and it's like, how do we do that? How can we embrace our lives? How can we then release and then reclaim and live a life that I sort of pause here, because it's like living a life that we back in. I don't think it's hope. It's after hope. It's like living a life that we want to live, that we're excited to live, that I suppose, meaning, right? People are talking about recreating meaning in our life, where I wrote a post last week of thinking out my whole life was about getting pregnant. Not my whole life. 10 years of it was about getting pregnant. 10 years of hope of trying to have a family. 10 years of thinking acupuncture and research, and oh my God, I mean, it's a passion, right? Some of us go at it with a passion, my poor partner and me, do you know what I mean? It's like freaking app galore, right? I mean,
Oh
freaking
God,
app.
yeah. The
Oh
time wasted on
my God. It's like,
online as well. And
oh, and it's like, decision making. And if we go down the IVF route, we go down, I was speaking to someone privately last week about, she's adopting, and it's like she's made that decision. She doesn't want an IVF, she doesn't want to go down the donor egg. So it's like reconnecting to what is it that we want, and it's like we're suddenly it doesn't work, and either it's taken away from us, and it's like, how do we find ways to grieve this loss in the most beautiful, messy, with gusto, right? Allowing ourselves to be seen of how painful. And there's so many women out there in this community, so many women in my community. This woman comes to my mind and she's like, this is the first time, Helen, that I've spoken about this with 5 other women. This is the first time that I've opened my mouth, and I feel so much better because I've spoken. It's painful, but I'm not alone in this anymore. I'm not alone, and we shouldn't be alone. We have to walk our paths, right? It's 3 of us here. We walk our separate paths with our partners who, we've worked really hard to embrace and recognize, for me, owning how Simon feels and how Simon processes, and how which is so different. I can't have got anyone as different to processing their emotions than I am. Really, it's quite amazing how we've chosen each other, because he doesn't do it. He doesn't process how I process, and I can't make him process the way I process, but I I demand that he allows me to do what I need to do for myself, and I thought he demands that I respect how he does things, because he can't do things any different. And that doesn't mean we don't speak about things, and we don't I stop pushing, he stops I stop pushing him, and he sort of turns around and allows me for him to see me do things my way. I hope that makes sense. And the arts have sort of given me, I suppose, this is the book that I won't be able to see. This is my book. So this is my Cosmic Smashbooking from the 40 days. And I think and this is the book that I'm working on now, which I knitted. I knitted a cover.
that's beautiful.
And I knitted it. I knitted this. The title, we give our books intentions and titles, and this book is about connection. And it came about in a workshop around connecting to family, connecting to mother and father, which was excruciating for me, really. And I wanted to make my own book around connection, and I knitted this. I knitted this at a time when, just after my father passed and we went into lockdown, and I just sat on my sofa in my studio and just knitted. I had no idea what I was knitting, and it just has, knit and plain, and I just trusted where the needle needed to do a knit and a plain, and just trust my intuition. And it doesn't actually, at the back, I sort of made these, sort of stitch these together, really, because it doesn't fit all on the back. But there's something about, sometimes we're not always connected, right? And we just have thin So this sort of interpret these as, you know, sometimes it's thin threads that connect us to people, if that makes sense.
Yes, it
And,
does. Yeah.
and it's, you know, it has I suppose it has my heart and soul. It has images and positive imagery and frustrations of not feeling connected at times, and no one needs to see it. I show it to people who get it. I show it to people who do similar work. I show it and I speak my truth. And even if it's just to one person, that's what matters, right? That's what matters in life, is that we're just understood and empathized, and that we get to see and own it. And I suppose as a child counselor, children, and we thinking about our own, like us as children, we, when a child is empathized with, their whole body releases. When a child is so distressed and upset, when the parent comes to them and says, gosh, you're really upset about something, can you tell me, or can you show me? The whole body is just like, you know, someone sees me, someone hears me. Or gosh, you're really angry about something, you know, can you tell me about that? Can you show me how, you know, your anger, and then helps that person to process, to own themselves, and their whole body relaxes and grounds in themselves. They don't have to disown themselves. So this is what we give to us. This is what I give to myself. This is what I feel so passionate that within ourselves there are those little children who need to be heard and seen and empathized. So we get to own what our lives, we get to be seen, we get to relax, we get to let go, we get to
So how can people find more about you, Helen,
yeah.
and what you do?
Well, my website is, I have a front page so they can come in, and which is from, it's called www.empoweredchildlessness.com, and the website is growing, so you'll be able to find it, because by the time this goes out, it will be up and running with much glory. There's a free gift that is on the page, which is a resting page, which I show you how to, when you're feeling really angry, and when you're feeling really upset, or you're feeling really, say, really pissed off, enraged, or you're feeling lost, or you're, you know, you don't, or you're feeling numb, whatever you're feeling, you can rest. And I show you how you can rest on a page and process, start, and just come back into our bodies, so we're not in fight, flight, freeze mode. So that's a free gift. It's a 20-minute video, and I show you, walk you through that.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll put that in the show notes, and because we won't be going out for
October.
a couple of months.
Yeah, we'll pop all that on there too, and anything else that you want to share as well. And I know that a long time ago, it must have been about 2 years ago, we were on, longer than that actually, I think now, we were actually on a workshop with you. Sarah, Steph from World Childless Week and we all joined you on a workshop webinar, and it's very therapeutic, so I can absolutely thoroughly personally recommend checking out all of Helen's work and her courses as well. It's so inspiring to talk to you as a fellow creative who does the same as you. I don't write every day, but I certainly draw most days, and I went through a point during the my grief where I stopped, because I literally couldn't. And I think there's also that element of kind of loosening up a little bit and not judging so much, but also not being affected by other people, that so much of this stuff is quite private too. So I work in an area, or my other life outside of the podcast is as a designer and a creative. It's always been my thing that I do. And you are constantly judged, critiqued, because you're working with people, with clients, and it's all very public facing. So I think one of the things I wanted to sort of to say is that actually it's not about what other people think when you're creating something and when you're doing something. It isn't. It's about you. It's I'm sure there's a whole other conversation that we could all have about imposter syndrome, but we'll perhaps come back to that another time, because I think that could be very long, certainly from my point of view anyway. But I think it's important that we look after ourselves as well.
Important, and it's not about the outcome. I think, as a designer, of course we need to critique, right? And we need to get it right. That people want to get it right, whatever that means. But I think with the therapeutic arts, it's not about getting it right. And even in the designer,
it's very different.
We need that creative flow. We need that. We need it to get our creative juices going, and we need to trust that. I think in the therapeutic arts, in my workshops, it's about just turning up. A lot of the time I don't even know what I'm going to do.
That's it. We
have to allow ourselves to turn up at the page, allow ourselves to take care of ourselves, this part of our lives that don't usually get a word in edgeways, because we're busy, we're in relationship, we're working, surviving, getting on. And it's like, how can we take care of ourselves, this part.
Thank you so very much, Helen, for joining us today. I think we've covered so much. It's been such an interesting conversation. I knew that it would be, and it's just absolutely wonderful to have you with us on the podcast. Thank you for being our guest today.
Go off in my own flow as well to talk about things.
Well, I found it so interesting, because I think actually just the conversations that I've been having quite lately in my life, and I know that there have been conversations you've been having as well, Michael, that I think it's very important that we talk about that. But it's lovely to have a different perspective on it and a different narrative from you as well, and that just deep insight in the work that you do as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.
Welcome.
It's been really lovely spending time with you, Helen.
Oh, you too, Michael. You too.
You're on the list for when I get over there. All right.
Yay!
It's a very long list.
And that's all we have to leave our show for today. But please don't forget that we are also on the Trinity of Facebook, Insta and Twitter. And all these links can be found on our website, www.thefullstoppod.com, where you can also register to our newsletter so you can keep up to date with what we're up to. We would also really appreciate it if you could rate us on the platform you're using to listen to the podcast. The more ratings we get, the wider our spread and the more of the community we can reach. We'll put all of Helen's contact details in the show notes. Now, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast or have a burning issue you think our community should be aware of, we've got All Official and have a form on the website that you can fill in to give us some details. Now, don't forget, we really love hearing from our audience, so please drop us a line at any time. Hit us up for a friendship on Facebook, connect with us on Instagram or Twitter. Now, don't forget about our virtual coffee chats on Saturday. You can find all the info on that on our Facebook page if you'd like to join us. And as always, it's important for us to let you know you are not alone. Yeah, it's recording.
Good. Yay. First time. Nerves. Stage fright.